All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome, thank you for coming. On behalf of the branch's Advisory Committee on Cultural Competency, I want you to join me in welcoming Commissioner Sean Connolly. He is Commissioner of the Department of Veterans Affairs, and he's a native of East Hartford. He's a lieutenant in the U.S. Army Reserve. Prior to becoming Commissioner of Veterans Affairs in 2015, Commissioner Connolly worked at Pratt & Whitney, most recently as their Global Ethics and Compliance Officer. He served 7 years on active duty as an Army judge and advocate, and is a veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He served as prosecutor and brigade legal advisor with the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and in Kuwait and Iraq. Commissioner Connolly served as an elected member of the National Board of Directors and the Federal Bar Association, and as president of the Pentagon chapter of the Federal Bar Association. He's currently an appointed member of the Federal Bar Association's National Council. His military awards and decorations include the Bronze Star Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Joint Service Commendation Medal, the Army Commendation Medal, the Army Achievement Medal, the Iraqi Companion Medal, and the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. Joining him is Anthony Palomino. He is an Air Force veteran, and he is the lead for military veterans at Electric Boat. So please join me in welcoming them both today.
So good morning, everybody. And thank you, Allison, for that tremendous welcome and introduction. Glad to have Anthony Palomino here with me today as well. And thanks to Allison and the Judicial Branch team for including veterans and the topic of veterans in your training this year. It's really so important. I get to be the cheerleader for our veterans here in Connecticut, telling the veteran story. We have over 200,000 veterans here in Connecticut and look forward to recruiting even many more to our state as a great destination state for our veterans. So I have the clicker here. As Allison mentioned, I'm still in the reserve, actually Lieutenant Colonel. This gray hair I didn't have when I was a lieutenant, but really still plugging away in the Army Reserve, and glad to do it. Glad to be wearing the uniform and serving with fellow soldiers here in Connecticut and Massachusetts and various other places around the state. So I was appointed again in March of 2015 as your Commissioner of Connecticut's Department of Veterans Affairs, and it really has been a humbling experience, to be honest. Getting around the state, having grown up in East Hartford, living in Hebron now, but getting around to many communities that I hadn't been to, even having grown up here in the state, and meeting veterans of all eras, from World War II and Korean War and Vietnam on up to our post 9/11 veterans, really is a humbling experience when you get out and see these individuals, these men and women who have served, who have raised their right hand to go off and defend freedom, sacrifice for us so that we can have events like this each and every day. That picture is our main campus. I'll tell you just a couple of minutes about our department before we get into kind of veteran talent issues. That's our campus in Rocky Hill. If you haven't been there, I invite you to come by anytime. It's a 92-acre campus, a beautiful campus. This picture is about this time last year, so you can start to see the fall foliage around the campus, but really a center for our veterans here in Connecticut. Traditionally, our missions there, you see the buildings, our long-term health care right on the campus, and residential facilities for transitional housing for our veterans, but really trying to turn this campus into a center of excellence for all of our veterans, and we're beginning to do that. Just this last week, we had 1,100 folks from around the state come to our campus so that we can honor Vietnam veterans and Vietnam-era veterans, awarding the Connecticut Wartime Service Medal to 400 veterans and having 700 plus family and friends there to watch them. And what a sight it was to see, to those veterans who didn't get the welcome that our veterans get today, to say thank you and welcome home. Really tremendous experience. And then on the 2nd of November, we're going to be kicking off Small Business Administration Week for veterans here in Connecticut, welcoming veterans who own businesses and welcoming veterans who aspire to be small business owners, and we're going to have the resources there on that day so that they can start that effort. So a little history. Connecticut actually is the first state in the nation to have a veterans home. It goes back to 1864, the Civil War era, when a gentleman by the name of Benjamin Fitch out in Darien, Connecticut, funded some of the militia from Connecticut, but also funded the first veterans home so that when welcoming those veterans back home, we could care for them there at the facility. And for those veterans that unfortunately didn't make it home, we could care for their families there as well. And so fast forwarding that 1864 facility to 1940 is when the facility at Rocky Hill first started. And these are some early pictures. The one up on the right is a picture of our campus back in the early days, back when it actually was run almost like a military installation, and my predecessor was called the Commandant and wore a uniform and actually lived there on the campus. That statue is out front of our facility now, up on the bottom right. That came from the original campus. So our mission, the overall mission sounds simple. It's serving those who have served, serving those 200,000 plus veterans from around the state of Connecticut. And so how do we do that? We are the State Department of Veterans Affairs. We're not the Federal Department of Veterans Affairs. The Federal Department of Veterans Affairs here in Connecticut runs two hospitals, one in West Haven, one in Newington. But what we do as a state it's a really four-pronged mission, four core functions. I mentioned the first couple that we do at the Rocky Hill campus. We have a residential facility there where transitional housing is available to veterans. We're making services available to those veterans who come there to help them identify their goals and objectives, whatever they may be: housing, education, employment, any objective that they identify, and having support there so that they can remove barriers to achieving those objectives. The long-term health care center is there. It's the newest building on the facility, built in 2008. It's like a skilled nursing facility, but it's also a chronic disease hospital. And so we have veterans there on the campus who need that level of care as well. It's called the Levittow Health Care Center, named after a Connecticut Congressional Medal of Honor recipient who was an Air Force veteran as well. Two other missions are advocacy and assistance missions. We have offices all around the state, one in each of the congressional districts, with veteran service officers that are state employees, veteran service officers out there to help our veterans in the communities access the benefits that they've earned and deserved, whether it be to submit a claim to the federal VA for compensation, whether it be to submit an application for health care with the federal VA, educational benefits, you name it, they're there to help the veterans out in the communities. And then finally, our cemeteries and memorials. We have 3 cemeteries, 3 state veteran cemeteries that come under our purview. The largest is in Middletown, which I like to call our mini Arlington, because it really is a beautiful place and a place of honor for our servicemen and women. And so that's our fourth function. Before we go any further, I do want to ask, how many veterans are in the room? I met 2 veterans, a Marine and an Air Force veteran here in the front. How many veterans are in the room? So 1, 2. I know Anthony is an Air Force veteran. Any others? All right, I want to thank you both for your service. We've got starting to get the services well represented in the room with Army, Air Force, Marine Corps. We're missing Coast Guard and Navy, but Army's going to beat Navy this year in the football game, so that's okay. All right, our vision, of course, coming in the last year and a half is world-class service excellence. We're working hard to get there. It's what our veterans here in Connecticut have earned and deserve, and so we're not going to stop until we do get there. And part of getting there is our partnerships with other state agencies and other veteran service organizations and nonprofit organizations all around the state. So starting to get into kind of the employment perspective and the diversity perspective of veterans. Veterans, whether they be in the Judicial Branch, other state agencies, and wherever they work here in Connecticut, Electric Boat, where Anthony comes from and represents. What we're doing from the labor and employment perspective at our agency is a few things. I mentioned partnering. We're partnering with the Department of Labor. Anyone from the Department of Labor here? No, okay. So we've got the Veteran Workforce Development Group out of the Connecticut Department of Labor. We've worked with the Department of Labor and now have a representative from their department coming to our campus 2 full days a week to sit with our veterans there on campus, whether it be resume writing, interviewing skills, you name it, they're there to help our veterans. The workplace out of Bridgeport, an employment aid nonprofit organization that has developed a platform to employment program, kind of nationally renowned program featured on 60 Minutes. The workplace came to our campus and did a program, a 5-week program just for veterans. It included veterans from the campus who are resident there, as well as veterans from the community coming to our campus to work on their employment, again, mock interviews, getting suits for graduation, helping them get to their final job, and paying for the first 2 months of employment so it takes risk away from the new employers. And then, of course, within our own agency, expanding internship opportunities. Since I joined in March of 2015, we signed a number of MOAs with schools all across the state, Manchester Community College, UConn, Yale, Quinnipiac, you name it, to bring students to our campus to see what veterans are all about, and kind of helped us tell the veterans story when they go off back to their schools and back to their future employers. And hopefully, at some point we'll get to hire some more support again, and they'll come back and help us with our mission at the Department of Veterans Affairs. So we've got a couple of veterans in the room, and I'm sure many of you have been exposed to veterans. Anyone have family who are veterans? All right. Any friends who are veterans? All right. So covers most of the room have exposure to veterans, right? Mentioned 200,000 plus veterans here in Connecticut. You figure that each veteran has maybe one or two or more family, friends, and so that really starts to touch and reach across the state for effect of how veterans affect our communities. When it comes to talent, I've served about 17 plus years between active duty and reserve now in the Army. Anthony served as well, and we have two veterans here in the front. You start to kind of gain an appreciation for what former military men and women bring to the table and can bring to the table to an organization. And you see the quote up here, and this comes from Revisiting the Business Case for Hiring a Veteran out of Syracuse University. It's talking about the compelling forms of resource diversity available, and veteran talent being one of the most compelling forms. Well, why is that? Well, one, they're rare. I mean, what's the percentage that we all hear now of those who serve? What is it? 1%. 1%. Yeah, probably a little less than 1%. So it's rare. To get veteran talent into your organization is rare, but it's also valuable. And we'll talk about, from my perspective, some of the reasons why veteran talent is valuable to your organization. And by the way, this is Sean Connolly talking. It's not the department or the state or the administration. This is Sean Connolly's presentation. So take that for what it's worth. But I want to give you my perspective on what it means to have veterans talent in your organization. Of course, they've got their unique capabilities that they've developed from their military experience, no matter what service it is, no matter what MOS, if you've heard that term before, which means military occupational specialty, what job they did, whether it's infantry or medical or finance, whatever the case may be, they bring those skills to the table. So let's talk about what some of those advantages are. First, entrepreneurial. On average, on balance, the military veteran, the former military service member brings that entrepreneurial spirit to what they do each and every day. They bring innovation, that ability to be self-starters and to get into an organization and get the job done. So they bring that entrepreneurial spirit. Not to say that non-veterans don't, but that's a characteristic on balance that veterans will bring to your organization. Talking about trusting. The culture of the military is such that military members, well, a lot of times they have to. You have to trust the man or woman to your left or right, and trust your superiors in getting a job done. Sometimes lives depend on it. And so that's built into their DNA to be trusting of each other, to help build that team aspect. That really is critical to organizations being successful. If you have those who trust each other, they have that cohesion, build that cohesive spirit to get a job done, whether it be a mission in the Judicial Branch, whether it be a mission in a corporate entity. They bring that trusting spirit to the table. So entrepreneurs, trusting, comfort in dynamic, changing, and uncertain environments, constantly having to readjust to changes, whether it be, again, if you're an infantry soldier who's out there and has to quickly make decisions, quickly adjust to changing circumstances and changing environments. No matter what job it is, developing that aspect that they have that comfort, not getting, a little nerves is okay, but not getting too nervous where they can't make a decision. And so bringing that to the table as well. And in today's world with advanced technology and constant changes in any organization, what a tribute to bring to an organization. Resilient, nonstop, can bounce back. Personal or professional failures can bounce back from that. A failure as a team, maybe you're working on a project as a team and it didn't go the way you wanted to go. They bring that resiliency to come back and start over and to really rededicate themselves to the mission of the organization that they've joined, that they're a part of. Knowledge and skills transfer proficiency. Again, it goes back to that change, being in that environment where you can quickly readjust. You may have again been in the medical field or the infantry field or the legal field like I am, but you can really use your military training and readjust. You can be a leader in one of those other organizations and come be a leader in a totally different field. But you bring that trust, that entrepreneurial spirit, and that team-oriented cohesiveness where you can work together, lead a team, and get a job done. And of course, committed and loyal. The mission of the military is to defend our freedom, defend our nation, and so building in that commitment, it's really built into servicemen and women. And so when they join a new organization, they're looking for that. They're looking for a purpose, meaning what they do each and every day. And so they can internalize that. They build it into what they do each and every day and really rededicate themselves to achieving the mission of that organization. And experience with diversity. If there's any group that is experienced with diversity, it's our military men and women, right? Look across the services. Doesn't matter whether it's Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Coast Guard. Look at the variety of backgrounds that come to those services, whether it be ethnic diversity, gender diversity, now sexual orientation diversity, cultural, religious, all these different backgrounds coming together for a common purpose, for a common mission. And military men and women get that opportunity to work with all those different people from all those different backgrounds, different parts of the country, different parts of the world. That the military includes, of course, immigrants from coming into America from other countries who have decided to sign up and don the uniform. Really an amazing experience for our military men and women to capture and to bring that to a new organization. They can work with just about anybody. So how do we hone that? How do we foster that talent going forward? It's I think most of you have had experience with military service members, whether it be family, friends, or yourselves. But there are some things to think about, again, from my perspective, in how we develop the talent that our veterans bring to the table. First is that early, frequent, and formal performance feedback. Military members like feedback. They like it early, they like it often, and they really want that that word from the boss, from their colleagues on how they're doing. Are they going down the right path to achieve the objective that's been set by the organization? And so, throughout our busy days, it sometimes is one of the last things we think about to do those evaluations. Well, that's a formal evaluation, but we can sit down and do an informal evaluation in a few minutes, particularly for our veteran service members, and let them know, how are they doing? Are they down the right path? Are your expectations being met? If not, how should they readjust? And so they really appreciate that. In fact, I think you'll find that sometimes veterans will flounder without it. They really need that feedback to move forward. Shared development opportunities. The culture of the military is such that service members kind of know what's next in their career. If they're working hard, if they're evaluated well, they know that, for example, a soldier that's enlisting in the Army can ultimately make it up to be a squad leader and start leading troops, can ultimately make it up to be a platoon sergeant, can ultimately make it up to be a first sergeant of a company with many, many more troops. Same with the officer side, coming in as a lieutenant. being a platoon leader, and if you achieve success, becoming a company commander and a brigade commander, and ultimately on up to be a division commander as a general officer. They kind of know what's in store if they work hard and get those evaluations based on their success. So veterans need that in other organizations as well. They've come to know that and come to see that there are ways to expand their opportunities. So what's next in your organization for a veteran if they work hard and achieve their mission? What can they do to get there? And so really sharing that is going to be important for veteran success. Set challenging goals. Of course, veterans like to be challenged. They like goals that are in line with the mission and the organizational intent. And so how are the goals that you've set for those veterans in line with the mission of the overall organization? Models to represent, role models. I know in my military career I've had mentors along the way, coming in as a new lieutenant in the Army, being set up with a sponsor, being set up with a mentor, someone you want to role model, and model your behaviors after. It can be formal, it can be informal, but really truly important for our servicemen and women. And then as you develop the careers of of the veterans in your organization, mentoring them, because they may be high performers. They may be achieving the success at the level they're at now, but they need to know what's next. They need to be mentored in what they need to do to make that jump. They are high performers, and sometimes high performers are promoted and just kind of pushed up without that mentoring and without that counseling that they need. And so that if they don't get that counseling, they might not be successful at the next level. So high performers, mentor them and counsel them where they're at, so that then they can smoothly transition up to the next level. So Anthony is here with me as well, and we're going to certainly be open to discussion and questions. And just last week, Anthony led a launch of a new program at Electric Boat, and their program is the Veterans Network program, where they're recruiting and developing talent. I invited Anthony to join me because he's got that fresh perspective that Electric Boat is launching, that they're looking at, that they're trying to figure out. They know the value of recruiting the talent, but also now cultivating that talent and developing that talent going forward. So I want to introduce Anthony, and we'll be open to questions as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. So first, my disclaimer. I apologize if I squeak or crack or sniffle. I'm not trying to relate to our presidential candidate. The sniffling is because, so one thing happens in October every single year. So when it's a cold weekend, the entire weekend, I get a call from my grandmother on Saturday. It says, can you please come and help me with something Sunday, which means, code word for, the attic is full of winter stuff. I need you to come and get it. So then when I go in the attic and I go in the basement to get the stuff, Monday I pay for it. My allergies are killing me, so I apologize if I sound awkward. So as the commissioner said, I was in the Air Force for about 12 years until October of 2014. I was in aviation for a while and finished my last 18 months as a drill instructor. In the Air Force, we call it a training instructor. So I get to wear one of those fancy Smokey the Hat bears and yell at kids as they come in the military and teach them why everything they know means they actually know nothing. So get to have fun, and then I got out in October after my 12th year. So kind of want to talk a little bit about what we're doing at Electric Boat and how that is also very important for what you guys are doing in the justice system and in the legal system. So I'm a Rhode Islander, don't hold that against me either, but I live in Warwick, Rhode Island. I work out of our Quonset Point and our Groton facilities for Electric Boat, representing about 2,200 or so veterans across our different facilities. So before that, I worked for Senator Whitehouse, who is no stranger to the judicial system. He was our Attorney General in Rhode Island for a while before becoming a U.S. Senator, so I did all his military and veterans work out of our Rhode Island District Office. Previous to that, I did 2 terms, 4 years as the CEO of the Rhode Island Military Organization, so I was very involved with trying to create legislation for veterans. A lot of it was very outdated Rhode Island legislation for veterans. Most of it was dated to the 1960s and 70s. A lot of people remember the Vietnam War was going on around there, so to think that we have any policies serving veterans from that time period, from that era, is not a great thing. So we as an organization had a legislative branch, and we're starting to look at policies for veterans and how we can make those things better. So within that program, I was part of the bench within the district court trying to create a veterans calendar, which they've successfully done now. And I know we're very proud of in Rhode Island having a diversion court for our veterans. And that means, and the commissioner have talked about this in Connecticut and doing some things here as a pilot program, it's very, very important both for the veterans and for the employers, for us that are out reaching out to veterans, looking for veterans to come and work, and making sure they have access to the resources that they need. So I'll segue into a very important conversation that I like to have, folks like yourself, that the commissioner touched on. So we talk about the structure in the military, always having direction, always knowing what the next step is, what the next rank is, and what you had to do. So a big part of the problems we see in the military, in the veteran community after the military, is that lack of purpose. And I think a lot of what we see in the legal system with the trouble that the veterans are getting into really stems from that lack of purpose. You have veterans that find themselves with substance and alcohol abuse problems because of a pathway they lead down to after getting out of the military. So one thing I'm trying to do at Electric Boat is created last week that sponsorship program. So exactly like the Colonel said, getting out of the military is a difficult task and often understood. Post-traumatic stress disorder, TBI, those things are very, there's a lack of understanding there. There's a lot of research being done, but we don't really know everything about it. It's constantly developing, which means when we're in the legal system and we're interacting with veterans that have some of these issues or could have symptoms of the issues, we have to make sure that we understand the challenges and the struggles so we can appropriately get to the base of the problem. So instead of putting somebody into jail for a couple months because of a minor infraction after a bar fight, which is a common one I usually use with veterans, we have to take that veteran, divert them from going into jail, and look at how can we get to the root of the problem. There are so many great resources with the Department of Veterans Affairs, both with the state and at the federal level, for different programs for veterans that are struggling with reintegrative issues. So instead of taking them and putting them in jail, which is going to do nothing for them when they're trying to get a job when they get out, it's only going to make the problem even worse. So what we've done in Rhode Island is try to make sure that we identify some of the core issues on those reintegration struggles and get them the resources that they need. So me now at Electric Boat, I consider myself the end user. So we interact and interface with all of these different programs, providing resources, training, mentorship to veterans after they get out of the military to then come and work in a good, meaningful career at General Dynamics. So within the program I just created, the EB Veterans Network, we do have a sponsorship program, we have an outreach team, and we have a support team. So I've told you a little about the sponsorship program. It's going to be a new veteran that just got hired to Electric Boat. It's going to be sponsored by someone who's been with us for a while, has already made this transition and can help to guide them into successful work in the civilian sector. That could mean exposing them to resources that the commissioner and his team have, exposing them to the different programs at the VA hospital, etc. Our outreach team is going to be leveraging the 2,000 plus veterans we already have to help us find veterans and then do the exact same thing. Find veterans out, getting ready to transition into the civilian workforce and helping them to find the resources, the training, so on and so forth. So basically the first step before they get into the sponsorship program. And then our support team is folks like yourself. A lot of you raise your hands. I have family, I have friends that are veterans or I served. We have a support team right now made up of almost 100 people that is exactly that. Folks that want to be able to support the veterans community. They might not know how, but they stepped up when I launched the program internally about 2 weeks ago and said, you know what, I don't know what I can do, but I'd love to do it. My mother served, father served, husband serves now, whatever the case might be. Folks want to be able to assist the veterans community. So we put together a support team so then myself and my team, we can educate those folks on what exactly that means. How do you support a veteran getting out of the military? What do you need to do? What are those resources that we need to connect them with and exactly how to do it? So it's a brand new program. I'm very excited about it. And it really comes down to that core thing again, is the purpose, the mission. So we have to provide veterans with a sense of purpose. We have it when we're in the military. We're in a very high-paced, high-tempo environment. We know what our goals are. We know what our vision is. We have that team. We have that support network instilled there. We know where to go to chow and when to do it. We know how to make our next rank. Everything is lined up for us. Then all of a sudden you step out of the military and it's just like a black hole. There's a lot of things that are out there. There's a lot of resources, but where are they? It's difficult to navigate because it's overwhelming to go from all the structure you could possibly ever ask for and more to no structure. And there's not always someone guiding you there to be able to show you what that next step is. So it's important that I tell you that, because I hope that in your day-to-day interactions, and I know we have a wide variety of folks that are here working in different agencies, but keep in mind that when you interact with a veteran, because they're getting into an issue, a misdemeanor for X, Y, or Z, it might be because there is a core underlying reason on why this is happening. And I think together collectively as a society, we need to pay attention to the fact that we have a full volunteer force right now. And those folks are volunteering to go over and serve our country and protect our well-being here in the United States, our Constitution, and everything else. So we do have a societal responsibility to make sure we reintegrate those folks when they come back. So when they come back, we have to say, what is the role that I can play? So I know a lot of folks here probably have some kind of touch with a veteran as they're going through the system. I think a lot of it, sure, call it compassion, but I think it's more than that. I think it's an understanding. Understanding that those folks, even though we put on a hard, tough shell and we put on our uniform and go to work every day, underneath we're still just human. And we do have struggles, we do have problems, we do have things that we need to overcome, and we need the assistance from a lot of great folks. All right, so the commissioner talked about skills. I think that it's second to none. Of course, I'm biased, but I think it's second to none a lot of things. So we come out of the military, we could go to school. So I did a lot of work in higher education when I was going through getting my degrees. And you interact with professors, and professors would always tell me how much they love veteran students in the classroom. Right, a little bit older, a little more mature, don't play on Facebook all day during class, understand the purpose of what you're trying to do and maximize that. So I think those types of skills are really very valuable for an employer like myself, saying that we know if we hire a veteran, we're going to get someone that's responsible, dependable, knows how to show up on time, can be inside and help to mentor and coach a lot of the college students. We bring many, many college students into Electric Boat. And veterans can often serve as a mentor for those folks because they're a couple years older. Typically now they got out of college after 4 or 6 years, let's say, of service time. So they bring a real interesting component to our culture at Electric Boat. And when we're talking about diversity, veterans already are a diverse population. So when you're hiring a veteran, or you have a hiring preference for veterans, or you're helping to serve veterans getting back into the civilian workforce, that is all trying to help with diversity and inclusion, because within the military, Colonel made a great point. When you have someone to your left or to your right, when you're overseas, you need to depend on that person. And it's regardless of religion, gender, color, anything. It doesn't matter. You need to depend on that person. You're a team, you're a unity, you're a chain link. And if there's any weak link in the chain, sometimes it could be military assets, government assets, or people that we lose because of that. So you build this culture within the military that team is blind. There's no color, there's no nothing. It doesn't matter. So there is a understanding of what diversity really means to a very, very deep level. So when you get out and you enter that civilian workforce, you bring that with you. You bring that understanding that when we work together as a team to work in an airplane, to be in an infantry, or building a submarine at Electric Boat, you bring with you that we are one team. It's one team, one fight, as we used to call it in the military. One team, one fight, regardless of anything else. So I really, I like to see employers getting engaged with diversity and inclusion and keeping veterans within that, just because of how much we bring from our military background. So I appreciate you guys having me here today. I think we want to take some time to do some questions and answers, right, Commissioner? Maybe open it up for some questions. I don't want to take too much longer. I know we only have about 20 minutes left. So thank you for letting me share my perspective. I appreciate it. I'll be happy to give out cards afterwards with folks. I hope that us at Electric Boat, knowing that we're going through a lot of hiring coming in the future, we're going to be working with a lot of the different programs around Connecticut to identify veterans getting out. Sometimes they are in a period of time where they need to go through that reintegration. They might be touching the legal system, but we want to work with them because we have a very strict policy. We all need security clearances to work at EB. So some things that might seem very minor to the day-to-day work that you guys do can actually be the deciding factor on whether somebody does or does not get a security clearance to get a job at work at Electric Boat. So I want you to also keep cognizant of that someone going through the system for something that seems minimal for folks that deal with it every day, to us it might not be minimal. And so a good person who just had a bad experience because they were in Iraq 2 months ago and are going through that transition might not be able to get a job with us or a lot of defense contractors who need a clearance because of a minor infraction. So I want to say that just because I see that too often. I see good people that make a silly decision, but they cannot get a job because of them being tied up in the system. So I'll end on that note, and I think we'll open up to any questions. Is that awesome?
How would you suggest the judicial branch help those people get to the point where they do get clearance?
Say that one more time.
Without being able to undo the offense, how does the judicial branch help those people get to the point where they can get clearance again?
So I think we talked about there being a pilot program. I think, first of all, having this conversation is a great first start. You know, so maybe identifying the root of the cause before we issue any kind of offense or put someone into jail or putting that solid on this. So I think my answer would be our diversion program has been very, very, very successful. So identifying a veteran at the very early stage when they get into intake and putting them into the Veterans Court is what it's called now, putting them into the Veterans Court. So there are professionals there. It's led by also an Army Lieutenant Colonel retired. Colonel Babcock leads that team of caseworkers, case managers, social workers, etc. So they can work with that veteran, identify if they're having any kind of struggles, and immediately connect them with resources that are available to them to get reintegration services, financial services, education and training opportunities through the VA. So being able to identify a veteran is number one. And it's not always so easy, but once they self-identify when they come into intake, which is our new process now in Rhode Island, we can then get them to where they need to be. And I think that corrective course, away from just going into court and being another number in the system, getting them into an environment they're comfortable with, they understand, it's led by other veterans and people that understand what they're going through to then bring them to the end goal.
And as an agency, as the Department of Veterans Affairs, we work with so many of the other agencies here in Connecticut. You know, we work with the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services to help provide substance abuse support services to our veterans. Department of Labor, I mentioned, Department of Social Services, getting the benefits that are available to the veterans. And so it's identifying those veterans up front. And one question that people now ask, instead of just, are you a veteran, have you served? And because some people might not identify themselves as a veteran for whatever reason, but have you served? And if the answer is yes, you can start getting them down the path to these other services that might be available to them. There is a program, it was a pilot program out of the New London area with a diversionary type of practice for the veterans. So there are some programs that are available even in the Judicial Branch for our veterans, and they make those services available. Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services right there at the court for those veterans. Other questions?
I have a question. I remember hearing about a year ago or so that effective homelessness among veterans was effectively eliminated in Connecticut. Is that really true? Because it seems like nationally you hear that there's a very high percentage of homeless people who are veterans. So how did we end it?
So great question. Yes, last summer of 2015, the governor announced end of chronic homelessness among our veterans, and then earlier this year, end of homelessness. And it's really effective end. It's not a situation where you will not find a homeless veteran. What it is having a system in place so that when we do identify a veteran who is homeless or in danger of becoming homeless, we can get them into that system right away. And so just a practical example for me, I was copied on an email, I think back in springtime, about a veteran who was living out of their vehicle in a Walmart parking lot. And so I triggered that process that was developed. I made the call, got one of our veteran homeless support, and who was also a veteran, on the phone with the individual, and that day, in touch with the veteran living out of their vehicle, and by the next day having a plan in place for that veteran to have a home. And so, yes, good point. Definitely correct the misnomer that there may be veterans out there, and tomorrow there may be a veteran who becomes homeless or in danger of becoming homeless, but it's having that system in place. One way to get that system is 211. There's also a number, and I'll get that number for you after if you're interested, where they can call directly to the group. Yes?
So a couple of years ago, veterans, it was a national case in terms of veterans being on a wait list. They weren't really being served properly, treated properly. Is that a problem for us here in Connecticut in terms of our veterans really being served at the level of whether it's treatment or just overall service that they need to be sustainable? Is that being, is the services being utilized appropriately and to the fullest capacity for them to be self-sufficient? And also outside of this EB pilot program, are there programs in place for service for veterans to actually get the level of training that they need to be sustainable in society?
So I think there's a couple of things. I'll touch on one thing quick, Commissioner. So my personal experience, I think there's an overabundance of programs. But I think you have a few barriers. One is just access. Like I said at the beginning, it's a very overwhelming process when you get out. And when you're coming back from overseas deployment or off active duty, and you step over into wearing the civilian clothes now, the structure is not necessarily there all the time, which means veterans have to reach out now. So veterans need to reach out to the Commissioner's office and his team, or reach out to the Department of Veterans Affairs Hospital to gain access to a lot of those programs. So sometimes because of the stigma and other things, veterans aren't always reaching out until they become chronically homeless, until we can identify them because they have come and identified themselves. So I think where the real problem exists in a lot of what you're saying and what you just said is that we need to focus on the step before they become chronically homeless. So if someone's working at EB and I know that they're couch surfing with friends and family and just making enough to get by because of whatever reasons, debt or a lot of other things, we need to identify that person and get them exposed to different programs that they're eligible for then at that point. But unfortunately, one thing that, call it a strength or a weakness that veterans bring is the sense of pride. And sometimes that pride makes it very difficult for us to reach out for help until it's often too late. So I think, I'll pass to the Commissioner. I know he's got a lot of great programs in his office, but there are a lot of programs, but I think there's some barriers to accessing those programs.
Going to your first point about I think you were talking about the healthcare through the federal VA here in Connecticut, and I would say anecdotally, because I do get around the state and talk to many veterans across various communities, anecdotally, we're in better shape with our federal VA hospitals here in Connecticut than some of the horror stories that you've seen out west, Arizona, Colorado, those kinds of things. I hear a lot of great things about the care that veterans get at the West Haven Hospital in Newington. Now, there are also a handful of others who didn't get the level of care that they were entitled to for whatever reason. And so when I hear about those stories, we're in touch as a state department with the federal VA leadership, and we meet almost on a monthly basis. And so I can pick up the phone and say, Director, I've got this issue, this one particular veteran, could you please look into it? And they will look into it and hopefully get that on a better path right away. From the employment side, I mentioned the Department of Labor earlier. There is a veterans group within the Connecticut Department of Labor that's there for our veterans. They get out to job fairs, they talk to veterans individually, helping them with their resumes, helping them set up interviews and job applications as well. As a state, we also have what we call the Step Up program, where Connecticut will fund a grant for employers that hire veterans up to $12,000 up to a 6-month time frame. And what that does is, again, take that risk away from that employer so that they have time to train that veteran. I mentioned the transferable skills. Well, there may be some technical skills that veteran needs to learn to do a particular job, but they're bringing all these other great skills with them. So that 6-month, that Step Up program grant allows those employers to take some of that risk away from that perspective as well. Good questions.
But I'll add that we are very fortunate here in this area. So I've gone to different institutions of the VA across the country. From Phoenix, I was actually out there for a while doing a study in how to go to the VA. That's where I get my care from. I was in DC at the Pentagon, so I would go to the DC VA. I've experienced a lot of different ones. Connecticut and Rhode Island in this sector, for whatever reason it might be, and I think leadership is a big part of that, but we do have wonderful facilities here. We've got a CBOC, well, several of them. We have one right in New London near our facility. A lot of our folks use. CBOC is community-based outpatient care, I think it is. So it's a smaller VA facility, but a lot of our folks at EB will utilize that one. So I don't hear any complaints about that, which means I think it's going well for them there too, because if there was complaints, I would hear about it. So I think we're fortunate in this area that we do have wonderful facilities and wonderful workers.
Sir.
In terms of residential facilities for vets, aging veterans, and I'm assuming there's more need for residential care. Is it privatized now? Is it all federally or state? Of course, we have the Rocky Hill campus, but my question is there enough residential care for the folks who need it, who will need, you know, long-term care.
So long-term care, take that long-term care piece first. I think there's enough. We have our healthcare center on campus for long-term chronic disease care. It's a 125-bed facility. We're not at 100% capacity, but we're close. We don't run a wait list right now. Those who are veterans and need that level of care are getting some of that care throughout the state of Connecticut. We do have an abundance of beds statewide. But from a long-term care perspective, I think there's enough here in Connecticut. Of course, we'd like to get more veterans and fill to capacity, and I think we'll do that the more we get the word out about the type of care. I'll just give you a quick example of one particular veteran who was on our campus at the long-term health care center. His family wanted to move him closer to where they lived. It was a little far from some parts of the state of Connecticut. He moved out. Within a month, he was back. Why? Because of the level of care that we provided. We have 2 doctors on staff at the healthcare center. Not all nursing homes have doctors on staff. They rotate through. And it's also the camaraderie. Just veterans being among veterans. Many veterans thrive that way when they're among other veterans. So having that camaraderie, having a box outside their room door with the service that they were in, and whatever sports teams they like, knowing that they can come out and kind of jab a Navy sailor and they're an Army soldier, you know, those kind of things, it really added to the experience. And so the family said, no, we're going to move that veteran back to the campus. From a housing perspective, I think across the board, based on what the work that we've done in effectively ending homelessness among veterans, there is housing available. The housing that's on our campus, the transitional, is old, it's outdated. It goes back to 1940, and so it's 4 to a room. At one time, it was an open bay barracks, and so we're looking at how to update that, how to transform the housing that we have on campus, so that it can be truly transitional, but a place that would welcome, particularly our post 9/11 veterans, welcome them to a place where they have their own room, own bathroom, get the services they need, and then transition on to their best path in life.
Yeah, and I think that goes on across Connecticut. So again, right next to my new London facility, our engineering building, there is a community there of 2 houses. They're tenement houses that are used for just veterans. And it is short-term transitional housing. And they do a wonderful job of taking those veterans who are usually highly functioning, don't have too many barriers to employment or self-sustainment, and they work with them on their resumes, on getting access to suits to do interviews properly and things like that. And so they interact with us, and they call us and say, hey, we've got a new group of 4 or 5 veterans this past 2 months. Can you come down and do a presentation? We'll send somebody from our recruiting team or myself will go down and interact with those veterans and work with them on how to give them a plan to get out of that housing. So I think, again, to echo what the commissioner said, there's a lot of great programs, but sometimes what that house faces is veterans not coming and accessing those types of opportunities until sometimes it's too late. And it's not that we can't provide resources at that point, but sometimes it's escalated to either being in the legal system because of something, petty crime or things like that. So being able to capture those veterans early is great. And I think another thing the commissioner just touched on too, so we do have some healthy fighting that goes on within the branches, right? So we rag on each other, but I think it's a true testament to see how easy veterans can come together when they need each other. And so I think that is one of the strongest points to being able to be successful, is when you're around other veterans, it kind of brings you back to what it was like when you're in the military. So veterans do succeed. We see that same thing in EB, and that was one of my selling points, and one of why we got to expand one of our components was because veterans working with other veterans, it breaks a barrier down. It's kind of that initial instinct that you trust and you depend on that other veteran. So not only are they trusting as employees, but we very easily trust each other like a fraternity, even when we get out regardless of branch. And one thing I usually bring up when I'm in that room, because you ask who everybody is, okay, who served in what branch, what did you do? And you hear the little bickering on, well, I was a Marine, okay, I was in the Navy, all right, well, you're part of the Navy, right? So we joke, and it's healthy, but kind of how I'll kick that off and then move on to being more productive is I'll say, okay, well, who here is a tanker? You'll get a few hands maybe raised. All right, who was in the Air Force working with airplanes? You get a few hands that raised. Aviation, there's always a lot of people in aviation. Okay, now where's my submariners? And you get a few hands proudly raised. Say, okay, so we all, regardless of branch, appreciate what it's like to have a working hatch that closes and seals. right? So everybody kind of laughs and giggles, and that's a good point, and then they kind of share stories. So I think it's just, there's such a great bond within the veterans community. When you get them access to the resources, when you put them in a room, in a group, in a home, whatever it is with other veterans, they tend to do very well together. Yeah.
One other point on the housing piece, there are other facilities that are more permanent housing for veterans. You have Victory Gardens at the Newington campus of the Newington Federal VA Hospital, where there are apartments for families, individual apartments for veterans as well. Sometimes they're subsidized. But you mentioned aging in place veterans, and that's an important piece for us to think about, because at our facility, which was meant really to be a transitional facility, we have veterans who have stayed a number of years, and they've aged in place, and so now looking at what's the best path for them. It might be a place like the retreat in Hartford for having that a little additional level of care, but not necessarily needing the nursing home level of care yet. So we're looking at that as well. But there I mentioned Victory Gardens. There's Cosgrove Common in Hartford. There's the old mansion in Rockville and Vernon. Places around the state that are there for veterans to have a permanent place, to have an apartment, but also to be among other veterans where they thrive. Other questions?
Just curious, so day to day, who interacts with veterans in their capacity on the work side, their work capacity in this room? So some, yeah. It's good to know.
How do you interact?
Not necessarily day to day, but I work in courts, in the local court system, so we may have folks that are coming in on those misdemeanors or minor charges, so we'll interact with them.
Out of curiosity, at what point in the timeline through them going through the process do you know and identify they're a veteran?
Well, we ask various questions, so as we get down to our interviews, we'll hopefully be able to determine it. But I guess the question would be, how can a member of the general public grab that information out of them? You know, if they're not willing to necessarily talk to me about that, if we can determine whether or not they're a veteran, but if they want that help, you know, how can I pull that out of them, or at least try to direct them to that help?
I think you just said it. Identifying the reason why you're asking is because there are things that is available to them. So that's typically how we ask it in my space is, you know, there's a lot of great programs for our veterans. Did you ever serve in the United States military? That's how we ask it. I agree, sometimes self-identifying, but that's that generation, I think, is moving out of that normal routine. I think this generation is usually pretty proud, and that's because of our country as a whole, right? There's a period of time we're in right now where patriotism is back, and military members serving in our country are appreciated at a very high level, higher than I've ever seen it before, since before I joined. So I think that veterans nowadays are typically more, not always, but more inclined to say, yes, I served, if you ask.
What, do you deal with all the courts throughout the state, or just to?
No, I'm based on a local, I'm just based in Maine.
Okay. Anyone work out of the New London area? Anyone familiar with the pilot that they had done over the last couple of years out there with DEMA support? Because that's one area where if you do identify a former service member, just connecting them with the agencies that could support. Certainly you can call us and we'll help you get connected. How about in front here? How
I used to work in the court system. So when they're presented, then we figure out whether or not they're a veteran. But the majority of them are either coming back from Afghanistan or Iraq, and they have PTSD issues or issues of employment. Now, is there anything in place that they can be referred to in terms of employment? That seems to be the biggest issue, along with the PTSD.
So I'll give you what we do in Rhode Island, and again, it works successfully. So when what you just said is identified, they get put into the diversion program, essentially like a group of folks, a cohort, that has to successfully complete the program. Now, while they're in that program, they have to meet with folks, case managers or social workers regularly, and if it is something because of PTSD or TBI or something like that, they're connected with the VA center, the vet center we call it, which is a program that understands how to interact with folks that are experiencing post-traumatic stress, typically combat post-traumatic stress. So when they go and they seek all those resources, they come back and at the end, they essentially graduate the program, and then that, typically it's not felonies, but that, whatever the situation was that got them into the court system is typically forgiven most of the time.
And here,
How about the issue of employment? That seems to be the biggest factor.
While they're in that program, before they graduate, they're exposed to training programs.
and here in Connecticut, the Federal VA Hospital does have a PTS program as well, run out of the West Haven Center. So that's for the PTS perspective. From the employment perspective, again, the Connecticut Department of Labor has, Terry Brennan runs a group out of Department of Labor. He's got several folks around the state that are there to help veterans connect with employment. Again, helping them with resumes, interviewing, applying to whatever positions might be available as well. They run an annual job, Heroes for Hires, out at Rensselaer Field in East Hartford. About 1,000 veterans traditionally come through. There's hundreds of employers, and so that's one particular day, but they're available year-round to help support the veterans with employment. I mentioned the workplace early on. We ran one program. We're going to run another program in 2017, and so that's another way to get about 5 weeks worth of training, getting them back into position and positioning them to apply for positions and be successful at getting those positions, paying again the first 2 months of that salary, so that removes more risk from the employers. So encourage you to stay in touch with us. I put up our page up here, which has social media, but we do say a lot on Facebook about events that are coming up, as well as putting up after whether they're successful pictures and those kinds of things. So encourage all of you to like us on Facebook, or to have your designees, the appropriate people like us, stay in touch with us. We can come over with our veteran service officers if you think there's a day that warrants that, to support veterans accessing their benefits. Happy to do that as well. Yes.
Yes, you had briefly spoke about or mentioned how schools, Connecticut state schools, are giving veterans some type of
Tuition waiver, yes.
Right. Could you explain that just a little bit briefly?
Sure. I'll mention a couple things about the benefits for veterans here in Connecticut. One is the tuition waiver program. Some of you may know that actively serving guardsmen and women are eligible for tuition waiver here in Connecticut for our state schools, but also goes to veterans as well. UConn, Central, Southern, all the state colleges and universities, community colleges as well. Veterans are eligible for tuition waiver so that they can attend those schools tuition free. It's a real benefit for veterans here in Connecticut, and another way another really way that veterans come and were recruited here to the state of Connecticut. Recently, the legislature passed 100% exemption for state taxes on military retired pay for veterans who have done a full career and are collecting retired pay, so no state taxes. And so a really great benefit. And then as of 1 October, earlier this month, the legislature passed and the governor signed a bill that gives veterans, small business owners, a 15% price preference when it comes to state procurement. So when they're going for state contracts, they get that added preference of a 15% price preference. Well, if I can, I'm going to call up our two veterans up here for just a minute, if you don't mind. I want to thank our Marine here for his service.
Thank you.
Present with the commissioner's coin. That comes with a challenge. I didn't tell them the challenge before they accepted it, but the challenge is next time I see them, if they don't have their coin on them and I coin them, they're going to owe me push-ups. So. I want to thank Anthony as well for joining us here. He's working hard on behalf of our Connecticut veterans out at Electric Boat and recruiting more Connecticut veterans out to Electric Boat. So we appreciate him and what they're doing out there for supporting our veterans. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And really, I'll leave some cards as well. Feel free to reach out to us. You know, if there's anything you need from a veteran's perspective, and we can connect you to the right services, we're happy to do that. So appreciate all the great work you're doing out there for our citizens and for our veterans in particular.